We're going to look at Federalist 36. This is part one. This is the last paper regarding revenue. Remember, he started a few papers ago and he started talking about taxation, revenue for the government. And it was a stretch. And he's finishing it off here, and then Madison is going to take over with number 37 and write a few important articles. So this is the last paper regarding revenue, and he rejects the criticism. He says, no, the people who criticize us, they say national government will not know enough about the states and the people to make smart decisions. They won't have the details. Well, he says, no, look, when the state government is divided into counties. Well, just like in states, they use the knowledge of the counties, the divisions of the state, to run the state, to make calculations and to come up with how much is needed to take care of what the government needs to know. The same thing in the national government. The federal government will take advantage of the knowledge of the state representatives that you send to Washington, D.C., or you send to the Capitol, and they'll do the same thing. They'll learn, they'll share with one another, and their knowledge goes up, and then they can take care of you all better. And of course, you remember the anti-federalists kept on saying that, well, if the federal government taxes people directly too, and then the state government taxes them, so they're going to be double taxed or taxed a lot. And he says, well, look, these guys are going to be wise enough not to do that. Yes, there are times that maybe both of them will have to tax you at a certain time, but your representatives will be wise enough. They're from amongst you and they're responsive to you. They'll know how much is too much and they won't do that. And then another thing is when the federal government wants to collect taxes from people, remember, he says we got to tax people directly when needed. And he says, well, we'll just use the state's government's apparatus, bureaucracy, civilians to help us collect those taxes so that it won't cost the federal government extra money, or in other words, cost you extra money to take care of this thing. And then towards the end of the article, as you've noticed with Hamilton, with all of the writers of Federalists, or with Publius, Hamilton, Madison, and John Jay, they talk about energy in the government, vigor. In other words, the government should be able to take care of the responsibilities you've given. And he mentions again the Articles of Confederation, America's first constitution. He says, look, we've learned this past 11 years, ever since the revolution happened, what the shortcomings have been in the states. And ever since Congress was set up under the Articles, or the Articles of Confederation were finally ratified by all the states, we've seen its shortcomings. So again, we need a good tax system, and it's not going to be burdensome. It's not going to double tax you. People in the national government will be knowledgeable enough because they'll be the wisest people from your state to take care of the business. And I'm going to read you the first paragraph of Federalist 36. There's a sentence there that is very important, and it'll tell you a little bit more about Alexander Hamilton himself. He doesn't mention himself by name, but let's read it and then we'll take it from there. Okay, now you can listen carefully. We have seen that the result of the observations to which the foregoing number has been principally devoted is that from the natural operation of the different interests and views of the various classes of the community, whether the representation of the people be more or less numerous, it will consist entirely of proprietors of land, of merchants, and of members of the learned professions, who will truly represent all those different interests and views. If it should be objected that we have seen other descriptions of men in the local legislatures, I answer that it is admitted there are exceptions to the rule, but not in sufficient number to influence the general complexion or character of the government. So he says from the last papers, especially the last one that we talked about, that he recognizes there are three classes of people, three groups of people that will be actually representing the wants and needs of all of the community, that will be taking care of the situation for them. Remember in the old last paper, he said the artisans want their representatives, the mechanics want their representatives. Everybody in the anti-federalist camp says you got to have more members to the House of Representatives, and this way different groups of people can have representatives of their own, like fishermen can have their own representatives, shoemakers can have their own representatives. And Hamilton says no, just some of these land owners and some of these merchants and some of these learned profession people, it's like lawyers, they will represent everybody's interest because their interest is tied up with their interest, with these other people's interests. So they will be able to represent the majority of the people real well. And he says if there are exceptions in some of the state governments, it's just that, it's an exception. But majority of the time, most of the people's interests are being represented. Then here, he's going to say something that's very important. Look, there are strong minds in every walk of life that will rise superior to the disadvantages of situation and will command the tribute due to their merit, not only from the classes to which they particularly belong, but from the society in general. The door ought to be equally open to all. Again, the door ought to be equally open to all, and I trust, for the credit of human nature, that we shall see examples of such vigorous plants flourishing in the soil of federal as well as of state legislation. But occasional instances of this sort will not render the reasoning founded upon the general course of things less conclusive. So here he says there are people, there are those unique talents that will show up and that will really, really work for the, try to work in a government, establish a government and do their best for you, that he's just saying that they will blossom, they will make the country blossom, they will set up the system in a way that will help bring about prosperity. And so he says we have geniuses like this. And guess who he's talking about? He's talking about himself, because he comes from a little island, a very poor situation, no father around, and people see that he's talented and they help him. They send him to New York at a young age, and then in New York, other people realize that he's talented. So they help him, and then he marries somebody well-to-do, and then he just shows his genius. So he's saying that in every country or in every era, there are these people that will shine through, and will set up things, work for the government, establish systems that will be great for the future of that society and sometimes for mankind. So keep that in mind. So when he says there are strong minds in every walk of life that will rise superior to the disadvantage of situation and will command the tribute due to their merit, not only from the classes to which they particularly belong, but from the society in general. The door ought to be equally open to all. So he says, if we let everybody have a fair start, there are so many talented people out there that given a chance, they'll shine through and they'll make their lives as well as the life of the society they live in much more better. So keep that in mind, and we will come back to part 2 of Federalist number 36. This is, and then make sure you revisit this part as we go through the rest of Federalist number 36.